Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for Monday, October 13th, 2025. The main topic of today's video will be Lorenzo, which is formed from 97L in the Eastern Atlantic. Surprisingly, at least in my view, after yesterday I said that we might be potentially looking at a bust with 97L in the central Eastern Atlantic. It wasn't really looking so great last night, but I guess it did improve quite dramatically overnight, and it became organized enough that the National Hurricane Center officially decided to pull the trigger and label us our 12th named storm. I think that is what the L name is, right? The 12th? Yeah, the 12th storm of the season, Tropical Storm Lorenzo. And as of the latest advisory, it is at 50 miles per hour with a minimum central pressure of 1,002 millibars, located at 14.8 north and 41.2 west, and moving northwest at 16 miles per hour. Here's a satellite image of the Atlantic to see what is going on, and you can see Lorenzo here, the main area of potentness in the tropics right now, convective activity blowing up. Although it is being sheared, so most of the convective activity is weighed to the eastern half of the storm. The low level center is probably somewhere in here, and that's what it's going to have to deal with over the next several days is high shear and not so favorable conditions for an intense storm per se, which is kind of why I doubted whether or not this would form in the first place. But I guess it was able to eke out enough organization that we now have Tropical Storm Lorenzo. And the good news as well is that this is in the central MDR. This is going to stay well away from any of us here in the Atlantic, including the Caribbean, Bahamas, especially the eastern coast of the United States. So nobody needs to really be worried about this in any way, shape, or form. This is just going to move harmlessly out to sea. And that's perfectly illustrated by looking at the latest National Hurricane Center track. And it's pretty much going to do a rendition of its 2019 version. If you remember, Hurricane Lorenzo from 2019 was a little bit of a controversial storm because it was, given Category 5 intensity, but everybody's kind of debating whether or not that was actually necessary. Something that most of you will not even understand. But anyways, Hurricane Lorenzo back in 2019, the last time that we used the naming list that Lorenzo is a part of, was also a storm that formed in the Eastern Atlantic and curved out to sea. Well, it did actually impact the Azores as a pretty powerful storm, and I think I think actually the costliest storm for the Azores on record. But at least in terms of the location that Lorenzo is right now compared to where it was in 2019, very similar location, and this time more than likely going to be much, much weaker. The National Hurricane Center only keeping this a tropical storm throughout the entirety of the next 5 days. But why is Lorenzo happening, especially since it is October after all, closer to mid-October now? It's October 13th. So, and climatologically speaking, I say that because typically in the month of October, we start to look more towards the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico for development right now, where I should note, by the way, sea surface temperature anomalies are much above normal. In fact, many places, or pretty much the entire Caribbean and Gulf, at least a degree Celsius above normal, some areas even getting as high as 2 degrees Celsius. But the MDR is warm too. And it's been a trend that we've been seeing in these late seasons over the past several years that these tropical waves that just come off the coast of Africa, they come off stronger later into the season, and the MDR continues to remain warm even as we head into the month of October, and we also have a La Nina here too. So it just seems like over the last several years, things have been getting more and more favorable for deep tropical MDR late season activity, and at least with Lorenzo and even Jerry, this year is a continuation of that. And we'll definitely have to see how this also, helps with things in terms of development here in the Caribbean too, because we have a La Nina, and that's definitely also a factor. look at the sea surface temperature anomalies here in the Pacific. Very, very cold sea surface temperature anomalies. And it's a La Nina. In fact, I could officially say it is a La Nina because the Climate Prediction Center, when they came out with their monthly climate prediction outlooks, it came out on October 9th. They issue monthly climate prediction outlooks, and with this month's edition, they officially changed their ENSO alert system status, as they have here, to La Nina advisory, meaning, and it's in the first sentence here in their little discussion, La Nina conditions are present and are favored to persist through December 2025 to February 2026. So pretty much winter of 2025 to 2026. And then they say that sometime early next year, we're going to see a transition to ENSO neutral. So we are in La Nina right now, very, very warm Atlantic. That definitely makes sense as to why we've been having a lot of recent, or at least conditions are more favorable enough that we are seeing some late season deep tropical activity in the eastern Atlantic. But I'm just going to tell you, you'll want to especially watch the Caribbean too. And I'm saying that specifically as a way to hint at how things are going to, what we are going to need to be watching in the Atlantic over the next at least 2 weeks. And I know I've for a while been always hinting at, oh, we got to watch the Caribbean. There might be something interesting happening. But as I've said before, as I've even showed you with climatology before, the Caribbean is a major hotspot for where we typically see activity in the month of October. And with these La Nina years, whenever we have a very warm Caribbean and a cooler ENSO pattern like La Nina, things tend to be active in the Caribbean in October, and we've definitely seen our big fair share of that over the last several years. And just to show you how ENSO is going to progress and over the next several months, and I feel like we've not even really talked about ENSO much recently. I mean, it's mainly just been focusing on hurricane season. Since we are in hurricane season right now, I tend to talk about ENSO the most in the off season when we do only weekly video updates, at least weekly video updates relating to hurricane season. But now that we're in October, we're now starting to get into the winter months, and the hurricane season is winding down, and then eventually we might, from time to time, be hinting at what to look at in terms of how things might be next year. Although that's definitely way too early to think about right now. I guess we will start to talk about ENSO a little bit more, but as kind of an introductory, I do want to show you this map, official NOAA CPC ENSO probabilities issued as of October. So this is also updated for this month. And obviously, we have high chances for La Nina right now because we are pretty much in a La Nina. And then that's going to pretty much persist as the outlook here from this tab says, all the way till the end of the year into the winter months. And then eventually, as we head into early next year, we start seeing the chances for neutral conditions rise significantly. And then also, interestingly enough, we start seeing El Nino chances rise quite a bit, although especially once we get towards the spring, ENSO probabilities get very fuzzy and very confusing, but the highest chance is neutral. So we're probably going to be in a La Nina from now, as we are in a La Nina right now, probably going to persist through the rest of the year and into next year, and then we'll eventually get an ENSO neutral, and then we'll see where we go from there. But what does this mean, at least for this hurricane season specifically, from now until November 30th, when the hurricane season ends? Well, I will say that we do have, at least in terms of looking at the velocity potential anomalies, look at where we are right now, especially here in the Atlantic Basin. We have a bunch of greens, and we know what that means. That means rising motion in the atmosphere, and that lasts at least up until the end of October. So we have a few weeks left, and then as we get towards the end of October, we start seeing these browns and oranges set in. So maybe as we get towards the end of October, things will finally begin to quiet down for this hurricane season. But at least for now, favorable conditions are in place. And as I mentioned before, La Nina is very favorable, especially for the late season in October, and the Caribbean tends to be active. And put all of those things together and look at the European ensembles here for the next 7 to 10 days in the Atlantic. Well, first of all, we have, Lorenzo here. Again, stays out to sea. No need to worry about that. Although, if you look at, depending on what model you look at, some pretty funny things happen here with Lorenzo. But again, in terms of impacts to the Western Atlantic, no need to worry about Lorenzo. I just wanted to point it out that the European shows it. But what we will need to be watching for potential impacts to the Western Atlantic, look here in the Caribbean, quite a potent signal that shows up here. And this happens around 7 to 10 days out. Looks like a pretty aggressive tropical wave, maybe coming off the coast of Africa right now. Eventually ignites and sparks and intensifies quite a bit. You even see a few strong ensemble members here on the European. And this is the month of October in the Caribbean, and I'm bringing those two things up to kind of drill it into you that this is something that we are going to have to watch very closely. And then finally here on the GFS, taking this out over the next week, we have obviously Lorenzo here, and that's what I mean by, depending on what model you look at, some pretty funny things happen, because the GFS has this interesting thing with Lorenzo. Again, it stays well out to sea, but it kind of keeps it around for quite a bit, does a loop, kind of hangs out, and just dilly-dallies in the subtropics here. But notice as we get towards around a week out, we start to see a pretty potent wave. The same wave that you're seeing here on the European ensembles approach the Caribbean also shows up here on the GFS. And that definitely looks like some consolidation that happens, and definitely the sign of a signal of energy trying to get going here. And this is roughly 7 days out. So this time next week, and it is the Caribbean, and it is October, and we are in a La Nina, and we know how those things can come together. And the fact that we are seeing a signal definitely causes a thought of concern of potentially something might be coming up here in the Caribbean, and we will be watching it very, very closely. But with that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. That pretty much wraps up with what is going on in the tropics today, obviously with Lorenzo, and then seems like the rest beyond that is kind of quiet, and also not really much happening in the Eastern Pacific at the moment. So I'm going to leave it off here. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today. Please subscribe, like, comment, all the typical things that I go over, but I would really encourage you to do it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And as always, I'll be back with more tomorrow.